Every once in a while in the world of combat sports, seemingly out of nowhere appears a figure that quite literally shakes up the world. Sometimes this may be caused by skill, other times a charismatic personality, but oftentimes a combination of both. And one of those figures is Khabib Nurmagomedov, widely considered as one of the all-time greats of MMA. He stands as the epitome of dominance in MMA with a record of 29-0, and each bout saw him emerge with barely a scratch on his face. How can you possibly maintain such dominance amongst the elites of the elites in arguably the best MMA organization in the world? What is the formula to this unparalleled dominance? Khabib had proper guidance from the very start through his father and role model Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, may he rest in peace. Abdulmanap was a highly successful coach and produced many champions in combat sambo, wrestling and later mixed martial arts. Dagestan was stacked with highly specialized talents in boxing and wrestling, karate, combat sambo and many others. Abdulmanap then sought to introduce MMA into the region as well, which was probably never seen before. He was a pioneer of MMA in Dagestan, and this earned him wide respect. So although Khabib had world-class guidance in his father from the very start, he also made sure that the kid operated out of a sense of discipline, and he wanted to acclimate his son to hardships from the very start, aiming to toughen up his mind. It might be said with a little exaggeration that if we as individuals are to grow, we have to go through some form of hardships, because this represents the unknown. One of the pioneers of psychology, Carl Jung, he states that we humans operate out of certain archetypes, and those are essentially patterns of behaviors universal to all of us. And one of those archetypes is the mother archetype, which represents safety, nurturing and protection. And those are obviously good things, they are vital for human life, but if taken to the extreme, Carl Jung continued, they could turn into overprotection, entrapment and even oblivion. And in one's life, this would manifest as living an overly safe and comfortable life, never challenging one's barriers. Jung further argued that if an individual is to become complete or reach a state of individuation as he called it, you would have to leave this comfort and nurturing maternal archetype and enter the world of the unknown. And every culture throughout history has had their own methods of making this transition. For instance, the Spartan agoge in the ancient times, or the Maasai warrior initiation, the Native American vision quest, or the Aboriginal walkabout. Whether we're speaking of past or present, they all mark a pattern amongst cultures throughout history, and that is seeking discomfort, entering the unknown, and leaving the familiarity. And likewise, Khabib, under the guidance of his father, would always challenge his barriers through certain tasks. One of the most famous examples is when his father made him wrestle a bear cub at the mere age of 9 years old. And one may contemplate that the purpose behind this was to instill in him a fearlessness, a warrior spirit early on. And those initiation rituals, if you will, of challenging your fears, broadening your horizons, they would increase throughout his career. So in a sense, it might be said that Khabib was never really in his comfort zone, he was always challenging his barriers. In his native Dagestan, honor is a very important thing. It might come to simple things as hospitality to guests, respecting your elders, but above all, preservation of family and community reputation. In an interview, Khabib stated that in Dagestan, whenever a fuss emerged amongst children, they would settle it right then and there with wrestling. And if he ever got into a fight with another kid, he would say that his mother would tell him, "Don't come home unless you win. This does something to you." Competitiveness and honor was instilled in him early on in life. And with his father being such an honorable man in the region and having a strong reputation, it is very likely that a major goal of Khabib was to honor him in return. And this honor was also apparent in aspects such as education. Despite working out several times a day, having aspirations in combat sports, Khabib also excelled as a student, earning an honorary diploma in economics as well as speaking 5 languages. Khabib is as well-rounded of a fighter as you can get. For each aspect of MMA, he had dedicated a chunk of his life to mastering it in a sequential manner. No matter what his opponents would specialize in, he had an answer for all of it. He was too well-rounded. His combat sports journey began with wrestling, which he began at 8 years old, and according to him, he would do this for 1 hour every single day. If this is true, by the time he was 20 years old and had his first professional MMA match, he would have accumulated 4,380 hours of wrestling. At some point, he stated that he would spar with opponents non-stop for 1 hour straight, wrestle with one guy and then another, non-stop for 1 hour. At 15 years old, he transitioned into judo, so this would, in addition to freestyle wrestling, give him a solid foundation for upright clinching scenarios, foot trips, as well as the submission game. His judo coach would say in an interview, if he stayed, he would become a world medalist. He was that talented. And then at 17 years old, with a base in wrestling and judo and the submission game, he transitioned into combat sambo, probably the sport that comes the closest to the demands of MMA. He went on to become a 2-time world champion in the sport. Additionally, he won the world championships in Naga, a grappling organization, as well as 2 gold medals in the European Pancration Championships. Now here's a very important point. With the massive connections of his father and the stack of talent in the region, he likely had daily sparring and training with world-class athletes in various sports. This would include world-class sambo practitioners, Olympic medalists in wrestling, probably world-class boxers, and they would all help each other out there in the same roof, the same ceiling. In contrast, if we were to compare this to the US, not only is combat sports not as integrated in the culture, at least not to the same extent as Dagestan, but for professional athletes in such a large country, to get those specialized world-class training sessions, combine MMA fighters with Olympic wrestlers and boxers for instance, they would have to fly across vast distances, the logistics of it, the parameters, it would be tough. We have seen Khabib train with Olympic medalist wrestlers, judo practitioners and sambo practitioners, once again because of the proximity. And now, with a massive and world-class base in wrestling, in judo and sambo, the only missing step was to integrate all of this with an up-to-date and world-class guidance in MMA itself. Already 12-0 in MMA from regional competitions, he decided it was time to take it to the next level. And for this purpose, he traded the green and mountainous life of Dagestan for the dry and sandy San Jose in California, a polar opposite in culture and geography, in order to train at arguably one of the best MMA academies in the world, the American Kickboxing Academy, aka. Founded by Javier Mendez, who would later become a close figure to Khabib, AK specializes in world-class striking, a huge emphasis on wrestling, and grueling strength and conditioning sessions, and a reputation for producing many world champions. The decision to join AKA is what made Khabib a complete and integrated MMA fighter and what mainly took his striking to the next level. So in order to have a chance against Khabib, you must at least be as well-rounded as him, and you cannot be a one-trick pony. It is not enough to be a specialist in this case. If all you do is strike, you have world-class striking, you will end up on the ground. If you have the best submission game in the world, you will probably not be able to match his wrestling. Good luck taking him down in the first place. And let's say you actually are an Olympic medalist wrestler and your wrestling is superior to Khabib's. What are you gonna do once you have him down on the ground? Khabib can fight on his back. So no, if you're going to have a chance, you need to be just as well-rounded. And this is only the starting point. Because once you have the complete toolbox, the next step will be to match his pace. Khabib's routine is pretty straightforward. A lot of fighters, they will have specialized strength and conditioning routines with complex exercises and schemes. This is not the case for Khabib. Khabib competes through simplicity, consistency, and above all, mental toughness. This is where he sticks out the most. Every day he would train 3 times a day. In the morning it would be conditioning in some form of running or calisthenics or outdoors training with stones and rubber bands. Also there is footage of him doing weight training, of course, which I assume started at a later point in his career to deal with all the injuries he had to go through. After lunch it would be sparring. and in the evening it would alternate between grappling and striking. A lot of people, when they speak of his endurance, they believe he must be blessed with some kind of supernatural conditioning or whatnot. Likewise with his strength and power, the first thing people want to mention about his grappling is his strength level, that he overpowers his opponents and whatnot. Although I have no doubt that he is strong, above the norm at least, his grappling is not as much attributed to strength as people want to believe. It's all a part of his thousands after thousands of hours of drilling and his masterful understanding of balance and leverage. At this point he instinctually knows exactly where he needs to be, where he is the strongest and the opponent is the weakest. This gives people a false perception that it's all about his strength. Athletic qualities such as endurance, strength and power, they are under a set of physiological processes in the body, and this involves aerobic capacity and power, anaerobic capacity and power, and neuromuscular factors. And all of those, they further have their smaller subcomponents, such as oxygen transportation, buffer capacity and motor unit recruitment, among many others. However, there is one last component to all of this that is often under-discussed by the literature, but it serves as the backbone in Khabib's strength and conditioning, something that he holds a very clear advantage over his opponents, and that is the psychological factor, such as mental toughness and resilience. We have seen his strength and conditioning routine. There is nothing special about the composition of it. In fact, you will find tons of athletes with more specialized strength and conditioning training and advanced routines and schemes, with strength and conditioning coaches with various diplomas and degrees. For Khabib, however, once again, the specificity is the effort and the psychological strength of him. This is what he compensates with. He is just so psychologically prepared for the demands of a fight because of all the hardships he goes through in his strength and conditioning routine and his training sessions, that it makes up for a relatively unsystematic approach once again to his strength and conditioning. And combine this with his excellent skills and the thousands upon thousands of hours he has spent on learning grappling, wrestling and striking, mastering every discipline of mixed martial arts. Would he have been better under a competent strength and conditioning coach, that actually utilized the form of methodology? Most probably, and he probably got one at a later point of his career due to all the injuries he had to go through. But in the end, Khabib's mental toughness is also a perfect representation of his fighting style, the pressure that is. He is so fine with psychologically having to go through hardships, while most of his opponents are not to the same extent as him, so they just break. Now, it is worth mentioning that he did not merely have a psychological resilience, but also a physical one. I don't think this is talked about enough, but Khabib has an incredibly good chin. He can take a punch. We saw him get hit with shots that would put anyone else to sleep probably. But Khabib, he just ate them. So that means that even if you land a quote lucky punch on him, he will probably hold on his own. This is probably an over-abused term at this point, and it has probably lost its meaning honestly, because there is so many interpretations of recovery. It is a common notion in this day and age that recovery is an either-or kind of thing. Either you work hard without any recovery, or you're just simply a couch potato and you do nothing. But Khabib understands the importance of genuine recovery very well. He is far from reckless. And what do I mean by genuine recovery? One of my very favorite quotes ever by Khabib was during an interview where they were discussing this topic, and he said something in the fashion of, "What is recovery? A lot of people associate it, with massage or supplements, cryotherapy, stretching or yoga and whatnot. But no, the most important factor to recovery is sleep." How brilliant and how true. And there is actually research behind this. Almost every single physiological and cognitive process in the body is affected by a lack of sleep, whether it comes to the immune system, decision making, cardiovascular processes and whatnot. And you know what the funny thing is? I am willing to bet that Khabib did not read a single research paper on this issue. No, he used an even more powerful tool, and this tool is called common sense. Khabib explains that he would nap for several hours throughout the day between his multiple training sessions every day. He would nap after his morning session, after his lunch session, and after the evening session he would have a full night of sleep. And his reasoning was very simple. If you're already training 3 tough sessions every day, you're exposing your body to all of this stress, it needs to rest and restore itself. And what is the single greatest legal and a natural performance enhancer in the world? Nothing other than sleep. Khabib's purpose in life was very clear. Everything else revolved around his career as an athlete, and in the same interview he mentions that how other people are bound by outside responsibilities such as work. He further states if you want to be a world-class athlete, like the best, the actual elite of the elite, you have to be mindful about issues such as work. You essentially have to train all the time. And of course this is not an opportunity that is available to everyone, but the point remains clear. He did all of those things because he chose to. He had the necessary circumstances and he had the mental capacity to do so. And this is another reason, a very major reason why it is so hard to beat him, is that your circumstances or your situation may not put you in a position where you can even put in the necessary work to catch up with him, let alone the effort in his sessions. Now, speaking of circumstances, another very important and under-discussed topic is that of geography. Some parts of the world, certain terrains and certain conditions, they simply make you prepared for certain tasks. And when it comes to the task of combat sports, Dagestan is truly the mecca of it. In Dagestan, it's not just a matter of sport, it's part of the culture, especially when it comes to wrestling. This is like what soccer would be in Argentina. This is a tradition that has likely been practiced for hundreds to thousands of years in the region, the Caucasus that is. Children, they start at a very young age and the sport is deeply respected. The cultural significance likely played a big role in Khabib's early involvement in combat sports. Dagestan belongs to the Caucasus, and within this region you will find tons of other regions that have a strong culture of wrestling as well. This includes Chechnya, Adygea, Ossetia, Ingushetia and many more. And those are all autonomous regions that belong to Russia, but they all have their own very distinct cultures. And then we have the nature and outdoors. Dagestan is a region with diverse natural beauty, which includes mountains, greenery, rivers and even canyons. In other parts of the world, children will be surrounded by metros or skyscrapers and a lot of pollution. Children in Dagestan, they will grow up with a strong appreciation for nature and outdoors activities. They will have incentive to participate in those, and they will remain active from childhood to adulthood. A very important parameter is the high altitude and the rough terrains that Khabib grew up in. In his hometown, the altitude is about 1,500 meters above sea level. A city like Paris, in contrast, is 35 meters above sea level. And this difference might challenge the body to adapt to lower oxygen levels, which can lead to changes that possibly improve endurance and overall physical performance. And based on this factor alone, his body was conditioned to the challenges of high altitude living from a young age. Living at this altitude, it has been hypothesized that it might simulate certain adaptations, which, for example, stimulates the erythropoietin, EPO, a hormone that signals your body to produce more red blood cells, which carry oxygen around the body. And although the overall effects of this can vary from person to person and the evidence is conflicting in this regard, one thing is very certain: living under those hypoxic conditions will definitely increase one's mental resilience. And combine this with the rugged and tough terrains of the region, the harsh and volatile climate with cold winters and hot summers, and of course the code of work ethic common to Dagestan, and you have a recipe for a tough competitor. When we look at high achievers, oftentimes they have a strong faith or conviction in something, whether that is an organized religion such as Islam or Christianity or Judaism, or maybe an endeavor outside of religion. The point is that it provides an individual with a purpose and a clear direction. It tells you what you can do and cannot do. And it's important to note also that the correlation between faith and high achievement is complex. Not all high achievers have a religious faith, and not all people living with strong faith are high achievers. But in Khabib's case, all of the stars are aligned, because with his belief in his Islam and already existing mental toughness and discipline, it actually gives him certain advantages. And number one is purpose. If you have it from the start, what you can and cannot do, you have an ethical and moral framework that influences your behavior and decision making. And for some people, they provide comfort and consolation in difficult times. If you are faced with adversity, for instance, this was just a natural course of action as part of the laws of the fate that you believe in. So there is nothing wrong to it. It's just a matter of acceptance at this point. And with this ethical and moral framework comes a form of simplicity of life. Khabib lives a relatively modest lifestyle, and he devoutly abstains from temptations that are otherwise easy to succumb to, especially in a Western society. This means that the choices he makes in life are somewhat limited to a certain circle. So Khabib will operate through life with a checklist of no's due to his devout belief. For instance, no drugs or alcohol, no pride or arrogance, no extramarital affairs, no gambling, no extravagance, and so forth. And those are just natural principles for him. They need no elaboration, no further explanation. If you were to ask Khabib, why don't you drink alcohol? He would probably answer something in the fashion of, because that's what my faith states. It's just the way things are. Total and complete conviction. So because he has such strong conviction in his faith, he will not succumb to those temptations, and they will not come in the way of his combat sports career. So his path is relatively fixed. There is just one goal in mind, and he will put all of his energy into that. So who is the candidate that can match all of those strengths of Khabib and have a chance against him? Of course, as the saying goes, anything can happen in MMA, and randomness certainly plays a role when it comes to either victory or defeat. But purely from a statistical or mathematical standpoint, if you will, with all of those points in mind, I cannot think of a candidate past or present in a similar weight class that would have had a chance against Khabib except two. And one is George St-Pierre, and the other one is his teammate, Islam Makhachev. Thank you for watching this work. I am Salman, a strength and conditioning coach and a sports physiologist. If you're interested in private coaching, visit my websites. I have training programs as well.